Body of Christ. I have Simon Martin from Texas with me today. How's everything going in Texas, Simon?
It's a warm day.
Uh-huh.
So that is typical of Texas.
Yeah.
Warm and cold, or
Yeah,
hot
yeah.
and cold, I should say.
So we're going to do the typical talking about your religious past and talking about
Yeah.
how you became a believer and that kind of thing. So let's get into the religious past side of things. What religions or religion did you get involved in your life up until you were a believer?
Well, I was born basically into the Worldwide Church of God. I don't know how much you know about them,
No,
but
a little
my
bit.
dad was a minister in England, so that's what I was brought up in. And all I remember, I mean, I was in the church
Mm-hmm.
for about the first 15 years of my life, but I really didn't care to be there. I mean, I was there because I was the minister's son. So when he was giving a sermon, I was generally sitting down somewhere writing a short story or something and paying not a lot of attention. And the only thing was he always started a sermon with a joke. So I'd listen to the joke, then kind of, and plus the Worldwide Church of God it's like you're acting like an Israelite or a Jew. We kept all the feasts, we kept the Sabbath, we kept all the dietary restrictions. So it was, I mean, it was not fun for being a kid growing up in that, not being able to, the dietary restrictions were, it's just, when you're a kid, it's just kind of weird, I didn't enjoy it. And having to be a minister's son meant that I had to always behave myself and stuff like that. And that never went well. I was always in trouble. And plus I went to one of the church had 2 or 3 schools, and one of them was in England, and I went to it, and it was not capital punishment, corporal punishment.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. I mean, I spent more time getting paddled than I did learning.
Yeah, yeah. What type of churches were they that your dad was involved in?
It was just like he would travel around England and going to like these various little congregations that'd be set up in a hall or something, and so he'd drag us along.
No particular denomination of any sort of?
No, it's just Worldwide Church of God.
Oh, okay, yep.
Yeah. Never experimented with anything else, at least church-wise.
Yeah, and what kind of experiences did you have in the churches? Were you baptized and that kind of thing? Did you have to take? Because I don't think they would have had baptism in the Worldwide Church of God, would they?
They did do baptizing, but I never got baptized. I think you had to be a certain age. As I said, I really didn't do anything for 15 years, but just sit there and listen.
Yeah.
I got a lot of Bible study at Imperial School, so I had a pretty good, especially of the Old Testament, and then the Sermon on the Mount and stuff like that. I mean, I had a pretty good education, at least biblically, knowing the Bible, not knowing everything about the Bible, but having a good basis, a lot better than, people I, knew later on in life.
Were there any sort of weird experiences that you had in the churches? Like, in some Pentecostal churches, they talk in tongues and, throw themselves around on the floor and that kind of thing.
No, this was straight up teaching. I guess just the weirdest thing was like having to do fasting on the Day of Atonement, which is, and then we'd do Passover and we'd sit around at, the dining room table telling the Passover story like we're all Jews. I mean, it was just a very, very weird that part was weird to me because I'm not Jewish.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a kid from just outside London, and so.
It's all
But
about
they were.
following law, wasn't it? In the
Oh,
Worldwide Church of God.
oh yeah, the
And a lot
Worldwide
of
Church of God is.
festival kind of things, that kind of thing. I know a little bit about it, so yeah.
Yeah, we did all the festivals, like the Feast of Tabernacles. We would go. I mean, generally you'd travel to go somewhere for a week, and it would be church services every day, and it's very, very legalistic. And as a kid, especially a minister's son growing up in it, it was not fun. And then on the imperial school side of things, as I said, the corporal punishment was just that. I think really affected me, and I didn't realize how much it affected me until we got out of the church, and then I became really, really rebellious.
Oh wow, okay. And so when did you actually leave the Worldwide Church of God?
Okay, so we moved to the States in '75. The church asked my dad to move to where their headquarters were in Pasadena, California. We moved there. Then we moved to New York for the church. But my dad was actually publishing a magazine for the church, but it was not a religious magazine. It was their attempt to be kind of, worldly. So we moved to New York, and then my dad got involved with all these shenanigans in the church. He wasn't involved in the shenanigans, but I think he kind of brought it to light for certain people, and he eventually got drummed out of the church. And instead of being the end of church for us, we ended up moving to Tyler, Texas, where he joined up with the son of Herbert Armstrong, who was the leader of the Worldwide Church of God. So we moved there, and we spent like 9 months in Garnet Ted Armstrong's church, and then done. But whatever, it got out. It was like 15 years, at least for me. For my dad, longer, obviously. But that was the last time I ever went to church, and that would have been 1980.
Wouldn't have talked about hell or anything like that in the Worldwide Church of God. They wouldn't have talked about hell, like people going to hell and that kind of thing.
No, it was annihilationism in the Worldwide Church of God, not hell. So I never grew up with.
Yeah, you were threatened
hell, with it. Which is nice in a way, actually very nice. But so hell was almost always like a joke to me.
Yeah. It still is.
I ever took it seriously. Yeah. So after 15 years of the Worldwide Church and then whatever the other church was, we got out, and I sowed my wild oats. I had been kind of like under the religious thumb for 15 years, and that's my first 15 years of life, and I was at that age where it's like, and so I decided to have a good time all the time.
Yeah, so what did you do when you left the Worldwide Church of God? Did you go to any other churches, or did you just forget about church completely?
Forgot about church, and I pretty much forgot about God. I knew God existed. I always knew he existed, even when I kind of went off to, sow my wild oats when I was 15. But I guess it's just such a bad taste in my mouth from the Worldwide Church of God that I just threw everything out. I think I just had this. I had something in the back of my mind and knew God existed, but that was it. I didn't care.
Yeah.
I wanted to live my life because I felt like that first 15 years I hadn't, in a way. And I realized that more later on, not at that age. At that age, I just rebelled. But later on, I look back and go, well, there's a lot of reasons why I went through that phase, which lasted about 15 years, I would say.
Okay. Yeah.
As long as that's in the church, that's how long it took for me to kind of get it out of my system and do what I wanted to.
Yeah. So what was your view of, a little g God in the worldwide Church of God?
I mean, as I said, I knew the Bible stories. I knew Adam and Eve. I knew, the forbidden fruit. I mean, I knew Genesis and Exodus really well. So, I mean, he wasn't like a personal God. He was a very distant God to me, in a sense, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't learn much about him in the Worldwide Church of God. I knew stories, but as far as the nature of God, no idea. No idea whatsoever.
So did you actually get baptized in the Worldwide Church?
No.
Okay.
I think you had to. I don't think I was old enough to get baptized at the beginning. And then I think as it got closer to where I could have been baptized, that my dad was already beginning to think, this is not the right path. So yeah, never got baptized.
Yeah. So what is your story on how you came to the truth and became a believer? Is it a long one?
So, pardon?
Is it a long story?
I tend to be long-winded. No,
that's all right.
It's not exceptionally long. It just took a long time till I got there. And it was, as I said, about 15 to 20 years after we were out of the Worldwide Church of God, and we're in Dallas, Texas now with my wife. And I have no idea why I did this, but just one day I went onto Ernest Martin's website. And Ernest Martin used to be a minister, pretty top guy in the Worldwide Church of God. And he quit the Worldwide Church of God because he came to believe in the salvation of all. And so he started this website, Ask Elm. And my dad knew Ernest from the church days, both of them being ministers. I went to school in Imperial School in England with Samuel. So I knew who Ernest Martin was. And I guess I'd heard my dad mention that he had a website or something. And just one day, for no good reason, I went into his website and just started reading. And that started off with me with understanding salvation of all. That was my first really big step towards the truth, was that.
Yeah.
So, I'm really, really pleased. I, just out of the blue started reading, and I read almost everything on his website. Didn't understand everything. I don't think he gets everything right. He doesn't do the two gospels. But I also learned about the immortality of the soul is fake, the Trinity. And I never grew up with the Trinity, so that never made a single bit of sense to me. So, but I mean, I learned more about the Trinity and why it was false from Ernest Martin. So he started me on the way.
Yeah,
and
right.
It was great.
So what other writers did you sort of get into at the time, or maybe later on?
It was later on. So I started with Ernest, and I kind of felt like I'd read everything on his website and still didn't feel settled in what I'd learned. I knew there was something else. So I looked at Tent Maker. That didn't do anything for me. And then one day I was looking on Ernest's site at his links, and there was a link to Martin Zender. And I was like, oh, who is this? So I clicked on it. I started reading and watching his stuff. And that kind of was like, there's a lot more. And the thing about Martin I really appreciated is I'm a writer, and he is a writer, and he's a really good writer. And that he writes with a lot of clarity, and that really, really made things a lot easier to understand for me. So, yeah. I know he's brought a lot of people to the truth. So he's the one who really nailed the two gospels.
Yeah.
That was eye-opening, you know. Once you really get the two gospels, everything falls into place.
So I was going to ask who played a part in you coming into the truth. Obviously, it was Ernest and Martin Zender. Are there any other people that sort of like?
I mean, my dad, because I mean, he remained. I've talked to him. I mean, since he was a young boy, he searched for God to find out the truth. And so when he left the church, he studied all the time and was reading the Bible, and he was reading Ernest Martin. So he's the one, I think, that was the instigator, and that led me to Ernest Martin. Then that led me to Martin Zender, and then, you know, at some point it just all clicked.
All right. So thank you so much for sharing your stories, and it's been really good to hear what you've got to say, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much, Kath. It's been fun.
All right. Love, grace, and peace, everyone.
Take care.